Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome. It's always great to meet somebody new. Today I have for you new genre makers. And this episode, it's kind of unique and special because it goes over a bit of ground not only in the genre maker space, but in some of the early firsts in gaming as well. Because today we're going to talk about the world of isometric shooters. You know, the kind of stuff like Commando or maybe Gunsmoke, which is kind of a personal favorite in this genre for me. These are easy to pick up and play games that can get exceptionally tough the deeper you get into them, because it's just the more you have to keep track of. And today we're talking about one that came around the same time, and honestly a little earlier, in the form of Ninja Princess. Don't be dismayed if you haven't heard of this one, because in the States you likely never saw it under this name. It also predates Metroid for having a female heroine in it by almost a year. Why do I use Metroid as an example? Well, that's the one that most likely people had their first exposure to a female heroine through. They may not have recognized it at the time, but that's what it was. With all that said, if you have a bit of time, sit back and hang out a while as we dig into this one, what it was like, why you don't know more about it, and why it's ultimately a bit of a disservice that got set upon the game itself. So hang tight, this one's gonna be fun. In 1985, lots of games and consoles were coming out, making huge waves in the industry. Nintendo had their wildly popular Nintendo Entertainment System, Sega had their almost as well-known Sega Master System, and the battle was on to own the arcade scene in full force. Now Sega, as many of you may know, was a dominant force in this space for, almost as long as arcades existed, quite frankly. Ninja Princess, as it was known in Europe and Japan, was one of the games that they used to exert that force and dominance. This game was set during Japan's Edo period, around say 1630 in the Okami province, and this followed the princess who had been kidnapped and managed to escape the clutches of the evil tyrant Goikuro? Look, I don't do Japanese, and I know you guys always get angry, but that's the best I can do of that without a translator. I apologize. I'll put it up on screen now. She then actually ditches her traditional garb for that of a ninja and sets about the task of freeing her kingdom from his oppressive rule. Okay, so it's not a super ambitious story by today's standards, but at the time this would have been a really cool story. What's the big deal here, you ask? There were a few games out like this at the time. Well, yeah. However, this one beat both Commando and Gunsmoke to market, coming out in March of 1985, whereas the other two were released in May and October, respectively. This gives it the prestige of being one of the earlier run-and-gun games of this type to hit the market, and one of the only ones to have a female protagonist this early in gaming. You see, around this time, the arcade and console space was mostly aimed at male gamers, and while there were games with female protagonists like Miss Pac-Man, and, well, most of them just didn't have this kind of thing. You would either have a male protagonist or likely some form of plane or spaceship shooter dominating the arcade space around the time. So, having a female protagonist was kind of a unique thing to see, and made it special in its own unique way. So, what does it play like, I hear all of you asking? Well, let's dive in and take a look, shall we? Like you might expect out of this kind of game, a lot of the gameplay consists of running and gunning. I mean, that's the kind of game it is. Only, instead of shooting bullets, you throw ninja stars. I mean, you're a ninja, of course you're gonna throw ninja stars. However, unlike many of these games, the princess had an ability to vanish periodically. This would make her immune to damage for a brief period of time. I actually almost like this better than I do things like grenades and Commando, because it allows you to more easily manage nasty situations when you get into them. However, I'm betting a few of you by now, those of you who are Sega superfans, have started to notice that this looks really similar to another game, one called The Ninja. The reason they look so similar is because, well, they're the same game. That's just how it is. They're the same game. Yep. One of the things about this game is when they brought it to the West, they made the assumption that the Western audience, being more heavily focused on the male demographic, wouldn't take to a female heroine in a game. So, they retooled the game and replaced the princess with a generic ninja character. Now, it's hard to say if this actually affected the sales positively or negatively in the States. But one thing I will say is it seems like it's a bit more interesting in its original form before it was modified for the Western tastes, which I feel like Japan always had a questionable grasp on during this era, quite frankly. However, what do you guys actually think of this one? Did any of you ever play this title in its original form? Did any of you ever play the ninja at all? How many of you knew this came out before Metroid and that it had a female heroine in it? Let me know in the comments. While you're there, if you don't mind, please leave this video a like. And if you see more of my stuff you like, consider following the channel. It actually really does mean a lot to me. However, for now, thank you once again, and until we meet again, happy gaming.